good morning, everybody. No. It's good. I know there's a number of people on vacation. That's the blessing of being able to record it, is that whenever we get our communications people back in the office, we'll get it uploaded, and people will be able to watch this too. So that's a great thing. We're going to be starting the book of Ezra today. And as we kind of talk about Ezra and lead into this book, just a little bit of background here, right? We just finished 2 Kings last time. And we finished, and Israel was sent off into exile. The city of Jerusalem was destroyed, and God's people were carried off and away, and the city of Jerusalem effectively lay desolate. Now, if we wanted to go on a chronological look through the scriptures, we've actually missed a great deal of the Old Testament, right? So if we wanted to look in a chronological ordering of how things are going, you'd have to go into the prophets, and to be fair, we would have had to intersperse some of those prophets as we were working through the book of the Kings, because a lot of them are taking place during that time period. The prophets are ministering to the kings and trying to give them guidance according to God's will, right? And then, especially we'd look at Jeremiah, because Jeremiah is the exile prophet. He's the guy who's delivering the bad news, right, when Jerusalem gets defeated and taken off into captivity. Then we would have looked at Daniel and Ezekiel in some way, shape, or form, because they are kind of the prophets while God's people are in exile. And now we're jumping over that and we're coming to Ezra. So you might be wondering, why is the scripture organized like this? And it's actually just because of the type of books. So what we've been walking through have been the historical books, right? So we've been looking at books that describe the history of Israel. So you've got the first 5, that's the Torah, the law, the book of the prophets. And then after those first 5, you go into this history section, right? And actually, after we finish up Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, that'll be the end of the history section of the Old Testament. And then you get into kind of the, I don't know what to call it, the literature section, right? You've got the poems and the Proverbs and the Song of Songs, kind of the more song-oriented books. And then after that, you get into the prophets. And that's just exclusively how and why the Old Testament is divided the way it is. But we're going to go just how it's divided. So we're going to be in Ezra, which really is the story of the return. So gratefully for us, we didn't have to stay in exile for 70 years. We just had 2 weeks, and now we get to come back to Jerusalem. And that's what we're going to see happening here in Ezra chapter 1. Now, I'll admit, I'm still semi-debating on if I'm going to read them or if we're just going to skip over it entirely. There's some sections in here that are just long lists of names and numbers. And while it's scripture and it's valuable for us for that reason, I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on it, because it's not like I can tell you, oh, this is why this is significant. These are just the names and places that people are coming back from, right? So we'll at least look at it, we'll mention it, but we might skip over it in at least some capacity. But let's start with Ezra chapter 1, verse 1. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing. So now we need a little bit of historical background as to what's going on here, right? So who's this Cyrus guy? This is Cyrus the Great, and as we think about the Persian Empire, really the Persian Empire is kind of the first real world power, right? So if we're looking at this map on the screen, Babylon had a pretty sizable influence, as did Assyria. This is effectively the empire of Babylon and Assyria, but it's really just that Fertile Crescent area. The Persian Empire starts actually just kind of in this little region, and then when Cyrus takes control, he conquers all of Media, which is kind of the eastern portion of the Middle East. And then, I mean, you can see it even goes all the way down into India, right? He's got this whole area conquered already in 550. And then as he continues in his empire, he goes and he conquers the Babylonian Empire in 539 BC. And from there, he consolidates that power and extends it out so that he's even up in Turkey and maybe even has some forays into Greece as we look at that. His descendants will go into Africa and take over Egypt. And really, actually, this Persian Empire lasts for 200 years. So it's pretty sizable. It's not until Alexander the Great, which is a historical name we've probably heard comes around, that the Persian Empire gets defeated. Alexander the Great is the one who will take all of this for Greece and actually extend it even further than what the Persian Empire has. But this would be what I would consider kind of the first world superpower of the time. Obviously, we're not talking about the New World or anything like that, but the known world of that day. This is kind of the first big one. And Cyrus is really the originator of this empire. Obviously, we don't know what Cyrus the Great looks like, but this is an artist's depiction of him. And he's a really good ruler, actually. I would even go so far as to say that he's one of those instances where we see that God puts in power people and uses them for his glory. And that's what Cyrus is going to do. And you'll even see this here in verse 2. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. So notice, Cyrus has this calling from God. And note, he even uses the name of the Lord. He uses that name of Yahweh. You can see it with the 4 capital L-O-R-D, how it's all capitalized. This is Yahweh's name that's used here. He is saying, Yahweh has told me that I'm supposed to let his people go back and rebuild their temple. And again, I'm backtracking a little bit. If we looked at verse 1, this is to fulfill the prophecy that was spoken by Jeremiah. And does anybody know, how long did Jeremiah say that God's people would be in exile?
70 years?
Yeah, 70 years. That's the exile that Jeremiah puts forward. Now, there's a couple problems with this, and we do need to look at it. So if we just looked at it the most simply, from the time that the first people from Judah are exiled into Babylon, that's 605 BC. And then, I already said, when the Babylonian Empire is defeated by Cyrus, that's 539 BC. So what's the problem with that? How many years is that? My math's not great, but is that 70 years? Not quite. It's 66, right? 66 years. So now we have to kind of make either some rationalizations. We either have to say, well, 66 is pretty close to 70. God was pretty close when he said that it would be 70 years in exile. Or maybe as we look at it, we can find some other explanations for how that 70 years is going to be counted. Firstly, one of the ways that Jeremiah makes this prophecy, he actually says that it is related to Israel, Judah, and the surrounding areas. And so the first time that Babylon really takes control of the surrounding area is 609 BC. So if we take that 609 BC and we take it to 539 BC when Babylon gets defeated, how many years is that? 70. All right, so that's good. That would work. I was reading, though, this week, and I think there might even be more fulfillment. When God makes a promise, I think God sometimes goes above and beyond when he's fulfilling that promise. So the second set of dates I have up here are 605 BC to 538/536 BC. Why do I say this? It says that in Cyrus's first year, he makes this decree. Now, I've briefly mentioned this in the past, but as they organize the calendars of the kings, different kingdoms do it in different ways. His first year would have been his first full year as king in the Persian Empire. So that's 538 BC. Now that still doesn't get us to 70 years from that 605 when Israel is first exiled, when some of those Jewish people from Jerusalem are taken captive. But let's just propose hypothetically, let's say that King Cyrus, when he takes the throne, that his first act in his first full year is not to let the Jews go home. That's not his first decree. Let's say it's in the 11th month of that year. He takes some time to get control of his kingdom, to get to know people. Daniel is actually one of his advisors as well. And so maybe Daniel is in his ear for, let's just say, 11 months per se. And it's now, this isn't how their calendar works, but for the sake of the argument, it's now late November, and he makes this decree that God's people can go home. Are they going to leave right away? What are they going to have to do? Yeah, they're going to have to pack up, they're going to have to prepare. And it's not as if they can just throw things in a U-Haul, right, or in a pod and have someone ship it for them. Everything that they're going to take, what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to pack it. They're going to have to find wagons. they're going to have to find beasts of burden. They're going to have to find all of the stuff and buy it and purchase it and prepare food and drink for the journey. And probably you want something for when you get there, right? Because are there going to be fields ready for you when you arrive? Probably not. So let's just say that they spend, I don't know, another 9 months getting ready. That seems relatively reasonable to me, right? 9 months to get ready to go, to pack up all of your stuff, your whole life, and get it ready to move in the ancient world. So now it's 537 BC, and it's probably late summer, right? So July, August. When they start going, are they going to get there in a month or two? No, they're traveling several hundred miles. And right, if we go back to the map, their options are they can either go from Babylon across a burning desert, and that's the short way. That's like 400 miles, right? So they could take the shortcut and go through desert for 400 miles. Are they going to do that? No, they're going to go north, and they're going to follow kind of the established roads to come back to Jerusalem. So we're talking more like 600 miles, give or take. Yes?
What kind of foods do they take along so that it can last over that kind of period of time?
No, that's a really good question. And some of it is, right, that as they're going to be bartering and trading for food, right? They're going to have to stop and they're going to have to get food from other places. But one of the things that they'll obviously do is they will take meat of some sort and they'll just salt the mess out of it, right? This is why salt is so valuable in the ancient world, because how do you preserve meat? Yeah, salt. It's the only way. It's not like they can throw it in the deep freeze and it'll stay good for however long. I have some old stuff in my deep freeze, right? Whatever it might be. So they'll salt the meat and they'll just literally kind of have it sitting in a giant barrel of salt. So that way it stays better. And they'll eat it then. Additionally, they'll obviously take grains and other things of that nature that just last a little bit longer. But you're right. Some of it is they're going to have to make stops and barter and trade for fresh fruits, for grains and barleys, and for additional supplies.
Even
they're
water.
not, yeah, even water, right? Yeah.
They have to plan. Think of the planning process. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Everybody's involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process. And so even as we look at this, let's just say to take another 5 to 6 months to travel, whatever it might be, I think it's entirely reasonable that if Cyrus issues this decree late in 538 BC, that it takes at least 15 months for Israel to go from Babylon to Jerusalem, just because of all the planning, because of the actual travel itself. That gets us to 536 BC. And again, 605 to 36, that's 69 years technically. But the way that the calendar works, it would be parts of 70 years, right? And so that could be a potential fulfillment. Now, I can't prove that. I can't prove that date. But no archaeologist worth their salt thinks that Cyrus issues the decree in 538 and they're instantly there, right? That's not how it works. Every archaeologist says, like, there's going to be a time period here. So maybe even there we see that 70 years taking place. But then the third 70 years that I think is for certain would be from 586 to 516. What's the significance of these dates? In 586, the temple is destroyed in Jerusalem. This is the last gasp. This is when Babylon comes and totally razes the city to the ground. 586. And in 516, the second temple is finished being rebuilt. And so here we certainly see 70 years of exile from God's temple, where God brings his people back into his presence. So however you want to take this, I think we can say that in at least some capacity, God fulfilled his promise of 70 years, right? And I think there's actually a pretty strong argument to be made that he actually did it in 3 different ways. That God said, yeah, I'm going to say 70 years, and it's going to be 70 years in every way you want to think about it. From the time that Babylon takes power, to the time that Israel is exiled, to the time that the temple is destroyed. And it's a beautiful testament, I think, to God and his workmanship, to his planning, to his meticulous nature when it comes to detail in this world. Any questions on that? Okay, so then let's keep going. Verse 3. We're 15 minutes in and we've gone 2 verses. This is great. We're doing so well. All right, and I want to get through 3 chapters. No, we're going to do it. I'm really not even worried. Verse 3, whoever is among you of all his people, so whoever's among the Jews, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. And let each survivor in whatever place he sojourns be assisted by the men of his place with silver and gold, with goods and with beasts, besides freewill offerings for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. So even here we see some of how their journey is going to be eased. What does Cyrus command other people to do? To help them. To provide for them, to provide animals, to provide silver and gold, to provide goods, freewill offerings, so that they can make it safely back to Jerusalem. And again, this is entirely a God thing, right? Why would this foreign king allow this people to go back and have this kind of support as they do so? This is God at work, right? This is God using Cyrus and fulfilling that prophecy. Even within the prophets, they even call Cyrus by name and say that Cyrus will bring a man named Cyrus. Obviously, they don't know Cyrus personally, but a man named Cyrus is going to bring God's people back, is going to help them on their way. This is the fulfillment of that prophecy because God is at work in the life of his creation and the life of his people. Verse 5, then rose up the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, everyone whose spirit God had stirred to go up to rebuild the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem. And so one reality we have to recognize here is that it's probably not every Jewish person who's in Babylon that goes back, right? And this kind of makes sense to us. We're 70 years in. There's potentially some third generation, right, residents of Babylon whose parents were born in Babylon, maybe even whose grandparents were born in Babylon, right? What do they know as home? Babylon, right? There are people who have no memory of Jerusalem, who don't know what it was like to live there, and probably are pretty comfortable, actually. We know of a number of people. I mean, Babylon was not Assyria, right? And Persia is not Assyria either. Both of these nations allowed the people that they brought in to kind of have lives, right? We can even see this as we see that some of the Jewish people are huge advisors in the king's household. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel, these are all people who have power and influence in the nation of Babylon. And Persia is the same way. Cyrus especially was known as a king who was very, very, frankly, just generous with his people, who wanted to get to know them, who wanted to care for them. I mean, the Persian Empire in their histories viewed him as practically a god, right? He was just the king, like this wonderful king. Think of like David and Solomon from Israel. Or think of like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln as presidents, right? The guys that everybody's like, oh yeah, they're pretty good presidents, right? He's that kind of leader. And so there are probably many people, many Jewish people of Jewish descent who stay there, but there are also a number who feel that spirit stirring and say, yeah, we got to go home. Sidebar, fun fact for the day. The Magi who come from the east to visit Jesus, there's some historical evidence or some just kind of church belief that those are Jews who are still living in the east after the time of the exile. That these are descendants of God's people who have been reading and foretelling and looking at the scriptures and say, hey, it's time. Jesus is like the Christ is coming, and that's why they come. Do we know that for sure? No, but I think as we look at this passage at least, it might lead us to think that that's at least a possibility. So verse 6, and all who were about them aided them with vessels of silver, with gold, with goods, with beasts, and with costly wares, besides all that was freely offered. Cyrus the king also brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and placed in the house of his gods. So we see that Cyrus even offers up some of the wealth that, like, the kingdom has stolen from Jerusalem. He says, hey, we took these from your temple, you take them back. And that's literally what he's doing. Again, you can just see God's hand at work here. What king does this, right? What conquering king says, I'm going to take the stuff that I have, that I've won in my hard-fought battles, and I'm just going to give it back to you. It's fine, take it. Verse 8, Cyrus, king of Persia, brought these out in the charge of Mithridath, the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. Sheshbazzar is actually of the Davidic line. This is his Babylonian or Persian name. In the same way that Daniel, what's Daniel's name? I think it's Belshazzar. Daniel has a Babylonian name that he goes by in the courts of the king. So does Zerubbabel, is his Hebrew name. Neither one's a very memorable name, right? Zerubbabel or Sheshbazzar, not exactly the ones we name our kids after. But
Just
this,
wait.
Yeah, right.
if I have another one, should I go with Zerubbabel? Right? I could get that Z in it, so I can have with that. But as we're looking at that, this probably means that Zerubbabel, like Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, that he's probably a relatively high servant in the Babylonian Empire. Because that's why they give him the Babylonian name, right? Because he has an influence, he has power, he has worth there. And that's probably what's going on here. And he's going to actually continue the line of Christ. If you look in the genealogies in Matthew and Luke, Zerubbabel's name is going to come back. So he's an important name to note as we're going through this. This is how God is continuing that line to Christ. As we're looking at Ezra, that's kind of our big takeaway here, is this is how God brings his people back so that Jesus can be born in Bethlehem, so that Jerusalem can be around, and so that Jesus can preach and teach and bring that kingdom of God into the lives of his people, and by extension into the lives of the Gentiles, you and me, right? This is the important takeaway here. Verse 9, and this was the number of them, 30 basins of gold, 1,000 basins of silver, 29 censers, 30 bowls of gold, 410 bowls of silver, and 1,000 other vessels. All the vessels of gold and of silver were 5,400. Obviously, if you take these numbers and add them up, they don't add up to 5,400. What I think is being said here, though I don't know this for a fact, is that this is adding up both the vessels that were given back to them from the temple supply and the new vessels that people are either bringing of their own accord or that their neighbors are giving to them, that they're offering up to them in aid. So this is that number, 5,400. Again, a fairly sizable amount when we think that these are all kind of gold and silver and bronze instruments that are going to be used in the temple. All these did Sheshbazzar bring up when the exiles were brought up from Babylonian to Jerusalem. So again, as we're looking at this, this is part of why it takes a long time to travel. I mean, I'm kind of picturing this. I'm trying to think, how many dishes do you think you have in your kitchen?
Not quite that many.
Yeah, I'm thinking I probably don't either. I'm just trying to even think what a rough estimate might be. I'm just thinking breakable stuff too, right? I'm not talking about the plastic Tupperware. That can go wherever. I can throw that in any box I want to. I barely have to pack that. I'd guess 100, 200 maybe, somewhere in there, breakable things in my kitchen. Give or take, I don't know. That feels like a reasonable estimate. So multiply that by 54, right? And that's how many of these precious gifts that they're bringing back. That's going to take a couple of donkeys, right, to get that back. So this is, again, part of why that preparation process is going to take a while. This isn't just going to happen overnight as they seek to head back. Any questions on chapter 1? Yeah, we don't spend a whole lot of time in Ezra. We haven't done a sermon series on Ezra yet. I don't know what we're doing on that front, but chapter 2. So this is where we get into some of the names. And as I'm here, I'm thinking we should read them because we've been reading through everything, so we might as well at least read it. But I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time explaining it. So if you have questions on it, feel free. But chapter 2, verse 1, now these were the people of the province who came up out of the captivity of those exiles whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried captive to Babylonia. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town. And so we're seeing here that out of all of these different people who are exiled, they're going home, right? This is the promise. This is the good news. This is the return that Ezra is all about. The return of these captives to where they belong.
They must have been pretty old, right, too, because they came back and then they're going back 70 years later or whatever.
Yeah. We're going to see that. And obviously not everybody who's coming back is old. Some of them are going to be the families, right? The descendants who, I mean, for whatever reason, right? Some people, those traditions stick better than others. So like for me, I love our traditional worship services. That's just how I grew up. It's something I love. It's something I really, really value. But there's other people, actually probably most people my age, right, who would prefer a more contemporary style of a worship service. And it's not that there's a right or wrong there, it's just the reality. So there's going to be plenty of people who have that kind of tradition and who want to come back who are younger. But you're absolutely right, there's going to be older people who are back who are pretty old at this point, right? Which again, I'm not trying to say anything about age. Age is just a number. But let's say you have a great number of 85-year-olds who are traveling back with you. Is that going to speed up or slow down your travels? Right? It's going to slow down your travel. And there's going to be families with young children. Is that going to speed up or slow down your travel? That's going to slow down your travel. This is a process.
It depends upon if you want to keep up with them.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of all the bathroom stops, right?
Yeah.
All those bathroom stops that you have with those little ones, right? And maybe it's a little easier then. You don't have them in the car seats, right? You don't have to get them unbuckled, and the 5-minute process of getting them back in and buckled. But anyway, yeah, we're going to see these in chapter 3. We're going to get there today. And some of these older, really just kind of elders within Israel, see this kind of bittersweet quality to this, right? Because they're coming back and they know that life is going to be different from what it was. And we're going to see that pretty clearly as we go through this. But verse 2, they came with Zerubbabel. Again, so there's Zerubbabel, that's Sheshbazzar. He's kind of the leader of this process. Jeshua. Jeshua is going to be the high priest, so his name is important. Nehemiah, he's going to be a pretty big factor in getting the temple rebuilt, so that's a good name to know. Sariah, Reliah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Bana. So these are kind of the big key elders who get singled out as leaders of this return. Really the only 3 names that I think have lasting significance for us are Zerubbabel, Yeshua, and Nehemiah. Yeshua is also a beautiful foreshadowing of Jesus, and we'll talk about that more when we get to him in a little greater detail. But Yeshua is literally like the Hebrew name of Jesus. Jesus is the Greek, Yeshua is the Hebrew. And so as you're looking at that, we've talked about this too, but Yeshua is foreshadowing the Jesus who is to come. That we're going to have a high priest who's going to bring us back into relationship with God. The Mordecai is not the Mordecai from the book of Esther. Not the same guy. Different guy, just a popular name in that day. Everybody loved to name their son Mordecai, apparently. But so the number of the men of the people of Israel, the sons of Parash, 2,172. The sons of Shephatiah, 372. The sons of Era, 775. The sons of Pahath Moab, namely the sons of Jeshua and Joab, 2,812. And so as we're looking through this, you can see that, is it just nuclear families who are coming? No, this is like a great family reunion, right? This is the biggest family reunion you've been a part of. This is people who are saying, yeah, we want our whole family, our whole tribe, our whole descendants of whoever to come back. The sons of Elam, 1,254. The sons of Zatu, 945. The sons of Zakai, 760. The sons of Bani, 642. The sons of Bebai, 623. The sons of Asgad, 1,222. The sons of Adonikim, 666. The sons of Bigvai, 2,056. The sons of Aden, 454. The sons of Ater, namely of Hezekiah, 98. The sons of Bezai, 323. The sons of Jorah, 112. The sons of Hashum, 223. The sons of Gibar, 95. The sons of Bethlehem, 123. And as we're looking at this, I do want to note, some of these I think are names of places. Some are names of people. So the sons of Bethlehem, obviously, where are they from? Bethlehem. So these are people who are from Bethlehem, who are going back and who are going to live in Bethlehem, right? So that's what's happening there. Another example of that would be Elam is a place. Anathoth is also a place coming up. The men of Netophath, 56. The men of Anathoth, 128. The sons of Asmapheth, 42. The sons of Kiriath Arim, Shephirah and Beeroth, 743. Those are all places too. The sons of Ramah and Geba, 621, also places. The men of Michmas, 122. The men of Bethel and Ai, 223. The sons of Nebo, 52. The sons of Magbish, 156. The sons of the other Elam, 1,254. The sons of Harim, 320. The sons of Lot, Hadid, and Ono, 725. The sons of Jericho, 345. The sons of Senah, 3,630. You'll also notice within here that some of these places are not traditional Judah, like southern kingdom. The ones that stood out to me, at least as we were going through it, would be Bethel and Ai. Bethel and Ai are two kind of prominent cities in northern Israel. In fact, Bethel is one of those places where the idolatry was really rampant, where they set up one of those golden calves that they were worshiping as Lord. This is a reminder that even there, God does save a remnant of his people. Even there, God is willing to offer grace and mercy and provides for them as they come back here. All right, so those are all of just kind of your regular everyday people, but we also need to hear about the priests. And so we hear that here, verse 36, the priests, the sons of Jediah of the house of Yeshua, 973. The sons of Immer, 1,052. The sons of Pashur, 1,247. The sons of Harim, 1,017. And also the Levites, the sons of Yeshua and Kadmiel of the sons of Hodaviah, 74. The singers, the sons of Asaph, 128. And so these are literally the descendants. If you go back to David's reign, there have been these sons of Asaph, these singers in the temple. These are those same descendants, kind of trickling down the line. So this is a long-lived line. The sons of the gatekeepers, the sons of Shallum, the sons of Ater, the sons of Talmon, the sons of Akub, the sons of Hatitah, and the sons of Shabai, in all 139. The temple servants, the sons of Ziha, the sons of Hasupha, the sons of Tabaoth, the sons of Keros, the sons of Siaha, the sons of Padon, the sons of Lebanah, the sons of Hagabah, the sons of Akub, the sons of Hagab, the sons of Shamlai, the sons of Hanan, the sons of Gedel, the sons of Getar, the sons of Reah, the sons of Rezin, the sons of Nekoda, the sons of Gazim, the sons of Uzzah, the sons of Paseah, the sons of Besai, the sons of Asna, the sons of Meonim, the sons of Nephishim, the sons of Bakbuk, the sons of Hakupha, the sons of Harther, the sons of Baziluth, the sons of Mehidah, the sons of Harsha, the sons of Barkos, the sons of Sisera, the sons of Tema, the sons of Neziah, and the sons of Hatipha. You can see why I was debating on whether we were going to actually read this or not, right? Here, whoever's recording this, Ezra records at least some of it. He's not around at this point. It's funny that the book of Ezra starts and Ezra is not even on the scene. He comes back later. So he comes back actually 80 years after this initial return, we think, give or take. So this is actually a long, drawn-out book. But whoever is chronicling this, that Ezra is going to include in his book, they're just giving us all the details as best as they can. They want us to know who was there, who came back. It's kind of like, and this isn't a perfect example, but at a family reunion, people like to know who was there, right? I'm thinking of my wife's big family reunion, but there's always pictures, right? There's always recordings. There's always stuff to kind of mark the occasion. That's what's going on here. The chronicler wants us to know who all was there, who all was a part of this.
Are the daughters and children counted in this too, or are they additional?
You know, that's a really good question, and I actually don't know the answer to that. My gut feeling is that this is just going to be the men, and that there's also going to be women and children included in the final number, but I don't actually know the answer to that. I'll look that up next time and have that ready to go. That's a really good question. But you're right, because it just says the sons so consistently, I think it's probably just focusing on the men for this particular count. But there's going to be a later kind of full accounting of the assembly, and I think that's going to be a number that includes women and children as well. So then the sons of Solomon's servants, the sons of Sotai, the sons of Hasaphereth, the sons of Peruda, the sons of Yala, the sons of Darkon, the sons of Gedel, the sons of Shephatiah, the sons of Hatil, the sons of Pokereth Hazabayim, and the sons of Ami. All the temple servants and the sons of Solomon's servants were 392. So you've got 392 people who have served in Solomon's house or in the temple who are coming back with the exiles. The following were those who came up from Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Cherub, Adon, and Immer. They could not prove their fathers' houses or their descent, whether they belonged to Israel. And so now we have this group of people who, for whatever reason, their genealogy isn't as sure. They're from certain areas of the Babylonian Empire. We're not exactly sure where these cities are, but they had been living somewhere in Babylonia, and when this edict comes out, they want to go back to Jerusalem, but they're unable to prove their kind of descendancy. And that has some impact. So verse 60, the sons of Deliah, the sons of Tobiah, and the sons of Nekoda, 652. Also of the sons of the priests, the sons of Habiah, the sons of Hakkoz, and the sons of Barzillai, who had taken a wife from the daughter of Barzillai the Gileadite, and was called by their name. These sought their registration among those enrolled in the genealogies, but they were not found there, and so they were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. So they try to claim a family connection. They try to claim their descendants of these people. But for whatever reason, the genealogies don't line up. So, bad example, because I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're telling the truth. But it would be like if I went and said, hey, Giannis, I'm one of your long-lost brothers, right? I want part of the family inheritance. Giannis would say, I don't know you, and you can't prove that, like, we're not having this conversation, right? That's kind of what's going on here. Now, the rationale behind why they're so firm on this is because God has pretty specific rules about who can serve in the temple, right? And so that's why we're seeing this. These are people who are even claiming to be part of the priesthood, and it's not showing up in the genealogies. They can't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and so they declare them unclean, that they can't serve in the priesthood. That it's not that they can't be a part of the return, right? It's not that they won't have a life there. It's just that they're unclean and can't serve in the priesthood because we're not sure on their genealogy. And actually, to the people's credit, what are they trying to do? Follow God's law. They know that it's been their lack of faithfulness that led to the exile. They know that it's been their brokenness that has sent them away. And so now as they come back, they're really trying to do the right thing. So this is, it maybe seems bad at first glance, like, oh, they're excluding all of these people. How horrible of them. But in reality, they're actually trying to protect really everybody. Because if they allow these unclean priests to serve, what's that going to do within God's justice? Not great things, right? And they don't want that for these people. They don't want that for the kingdom as a whole. So verse 63, the governor told them that they were not to partake of the most holy food until there should be a priest to consult Urim and Thummim. So here they even say, there's actually even this kind of temporary stay on their being included or not. They say, hey, let's wait until we actually anoint a high priest, and we'll have the high priest check the Urim and the Thummim. Just a reminder, there was some practice within the priesthood where they had some kind of, I don't know if they're dice or exactly what they are, but it's some kind of lot casting where they would cast lots, and it would be God's way of saying, yes, I want you to do this, or I want you to do that. So they're saying, let's wait until we have a high priest, and we'll do the Urim and the Thummim, and we'll see what God says. So they're not even totally disqualifying them, right? They're saying, hey, we're not sure, so let's be safe rather than sorry, and then we'll check with God when we have the appropriate people in place. So verse 64 then, the whole assembly together was 42,360, besides their male and female servants, of whom there were 7,337, and they had 200 male and female singers. Their horses were 736, their mules were 245, their camels were 435, and their donkeys were 6,720. Again, actually, the chronicler is so precise for us that he actually lets us know exactly how many beasts of burden they use to carry all of this stuff. So if you've ever wondered how many donkeys and horses and mules and camels you need to move roughly 40,000 people plus 10,000 servants, give or take, and all of their stuff from Babylon to Jerusalem, it's 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, 6,720 donkeys. It's quite a few donkeys, right? You need a little effort there. Could everybody ride the whole way based off those numbers? Yeah, there's a lot of walking, right, being done. These beasts of burden are mostly being used to move the stuff. and the people are going to have to hoof it most of the way. Now, I do think that number, that 42,360, that's everybody. So that's men, women, children, that's all of Jerusalem, all of the Jews who are coming back. As we look at that number, it does say something to us, because if we look at like the census, when God's people first come into the Promised Land, there are multiple tribes. I think actually even most of the tribes, so each of the 12 tribes has more men than they have total people who are coming back. So like off the top of my head, Judah has somewhere in the 60,000 men who come into the original Promised Land. Not women and children, just the men, who are actually, that's even just the men who are of military age, right, who can fight. So that might not even include the elderly. So God's people have seen a dramatic winnowing because of their lack of faithfulness. God's justice has been levied on his people, and there's problems because of that. Some of the heads of families, when they came to the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem, made free will offerings for the house of God to erect it on its site. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury of the work 61,000 derricks of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priests' garments. And so now it's time for one of our favorite segments. It is time for some Bible math. We're so excited, right? We have to figure out how much they actually allowed. And so 1 derrick equals about 1/4 of an ounce. And 61,000 derricks then equals 15,250 ounces. Now we know a pound equals 16 ounces, so 15,250 ounces of gold equals about 953 pounds of gold. If my math is right, that's 953 and 1/8 pounds of gold. They did not use pounds, so they don't have a good round number for us, right? Pretty sizable amount, right? Yeah, that's a lot of gold. I have certainly not seen that much gold in my life. It's sizable. So then on the silver front, 1 mina equals 1.25 pounds, roughly. So 5,000 minas equals 6,250 pounds of silver. Again, that's a big number. That's a lot of silver. 953 pounds of gold, 6,250 pounds of silver. That's a lot of generosity, a lot of great stuff that God's people are donating to help with the rebuilding of the temple, to offer up this free will offering. But even these numbers reflect just how far Jerusalem has fallen. Because if we go back to when King David sets up kind of a treasury for the building of the first temple, this is just what King David offers. So King David goes first and he says, I'm going to give 3,000 talents of gold and 7,000 talents of silver. A talent was about 75 pounds. So just David, this isn't even the rest of the tribes, this isn't even the rest of the people, this is just David offers up 225,000 pounds of gold and 525,000 pounds of silver. So David alone does this, and then God's people respond with even more when he sets aside the treasury for the first temple. So again, if you're comparing that number, 225,000, 525,000, 953, 6,250. Israel has fallen dramatically from where it used to be. And this is why God's people are so eagerly desiring to be faithful to what God has for them. Because they know what's happened. And they know who's to blame. They know it's not God. They know they're the ones who have broken the covenant, and that God has simply kept his end of the bargain and said, if you don't follow after me, what's going to happen? You're going to be cursed. You're going to experience punishment. You're going to experience wrath. You're going to experience judgment. And the blessings that I have given to you, they'll be taken away. Now again, only for a time, only for 70 years, and they're going to start to build some of this back. But it's a pretty dramatic drop from where they were when they first started the kingdom to where they are now. Now, the priests, the Levites, some of the people, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants lived in their towns, and all the rest of Israel in their towns. And so we see it's not just that they're all living in Jerusalem, they are spread out in the various towns and places in Israel. Any questions on chapter 2? All right.
There
let's
really
move on.
wasn't much left of the towns that they came back to either, was there? And
Yeah.
one was probably had to live in tents.
Yeah, and we'll see that as we look at this. There would have been some semblance of kind of leftover people, right? Because when the Babylonians took people to Babylon, they took other people and they put them in the kingdom of Judah. But Jerusalem, for instance, is a city that was totally destroyed. I'd wager there are other cities, other towns that are totally broken down. So yeah, this is a process. It's going to take a while before they really can be back in their homes, before they can really feel like this is home again. But they want to be back, and so in the meantime, they're going to make do.
So were they just left vacated? There was nothing there, nobody else came in?
Yeah, so some of them, and we'll see this because there's people who do live here, and even if we looked at like Jeremiah, we could see some of this. There are people who live in certain areas, but there are certain areas that Babylon says, nope, nobody's going to live there, Jerusalem being one of those.